Welcome to every single one of you who is joining us today for our topic on the battlefield here at Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, our conversation circle. And this is a topic that might surprise you coming from Still a Moving Center, which tends to be sort of a peace-loving place. And yet there is a certain toughness to life that preserves peace, I think. And it's also the case that there's a rich symbolism to this idea of the battlefield, because each of us faces grave difficulties at different times in our lives. And our speaker for today is really eminently qualified to speak with us. She is a colonel, retired colonel from the U.S. Army, where she worked for 30 years. And she has tremendous experience. She was working with the Pentagon at the time of 9/11. She had something to do with actually the reconstruction of the building that kept that part that was hit from being completely destroyed. And since leaving military service, she has created a business called Mentally Tough Women. And this business, as I understand it, is very devoted not to making money, but to making people stronger so that they can face their life stressors and I imagine their traumas with greater equanimity and less crumbling in the face of what they are going through. I'm going to put into the chat her story on her website. So if you'd like to know more, you can follow it up. So Deb, can I let you take it away on the battlefield?
Thank you so much, Renee. That was beautifully done. And I love the reading. I think that we're all, in the engineering world, we say the road to improvement is always under construction. That's what it says. And we're always chiseling away and working and trying to make things better. But it is so wonderful to be with you and the time that we've already spent together. And this topic, yes, is near and dear to me because it will surprise people that from the military people that I'll be talking about, and definitely my own experiences, is that you have to be kind and loving and supportive or you can't survive in this business. You have to figure out a way ahead even when the path is blocked. And so today we're going to talk about, and I'd love to jump in, and I thought I'd start with someone who you may have heard about, Athena. Athena was the goddess of war back about 2,500 years BC, 2,500 years BC. And Athena was also not just the goddess of war, but she was the goddess of wisdom. And so I actually embody the helmet because I think that protecting our wisdom is one of the most important things that we can do in our lives, no matter what's happening around us in our relationships. And the reason she's known today, and there's so many awards that are given in her name, because it matters that much. It's a sustainable way of looking at life. She didn't just go to battle to fight. She went because she had the intent. If that was the last resort, then she would do it. And she had her people that she sponsored, like Jason and the Argonauts and Hercules and others. Those are the stories that came about, which we love. And I just want to highlight that wisdom, always protecting it, because that's certainly one of the tools that I use under stress to say above else, do everything you can to protect your wisdom because you may not like the choices that are made. Now, the other person that I want you to consider is that of Sun Tzu. And here are some quotes from him. And the greatest battle is that which requires the greatest victory is that which requires no battle. I mean, that's the first quote. And the other one is about who wishes to fight must first count the cost. And in the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. So imagine this is a war general way back BC who is attributed with these quotes. And I think in life, these are wonderful quotes. These are enduring things that we want to embed into our lives. Because why? They actually work. They work. When you look at life, sometimes I talk about having a new set of glasses, that you're going to look at the same facts, but with this new lens, you're going to see that it's not about the fight. And I didn't mention Aries, Ares. How many people know about Ares? Not Aries like up there, but Ares, the brother of Athena. Nobody talks about him today, because all he did was want to do wanton destruction. And the same with Sun Tzu. He was a very famous, and why? Because he was successful. So let's go to the next one. And then, of course, we have Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address. And I think what I want to highlight here, because you can read the Gettysburg Address yourself, it's not very long, it's only like 400 words, but he spoke these words after a horrific time in our country, where so many precious lives were lost, fighting to preserve the freedom so that we all could have equal rights. Essentially, it didn't happen for years later, but that was the intent, that all men are created equal. And women too. It took us a while to get into that, into that definition. But he wanted to make sure that those who had not died in vain, and that they would be remembered, and that piece of it would be remembered, although he says in it that he doesn't think that that nobody else is going to remember what he did. But the reason we remember it is why? Because those profound words, those empowering words, those powerful words helped create the nation that we have today. And even though he was killed very shortly after, his words lived on. And so what we say matters. What we do matters even more. And when you combine the words and what you do, which is what he did, he had a lot of enemies during his life, and he was judged constantly as to his decisions. And that's a military leader. He was a civilian, but in the US, the military is led by the President of the United States, who is voted. We support and defend in the military the Constitution, not any particular person. We support the Constitution. Therefore, if the people elect the president, then we follow the rules of the president unless they are against certain rules. But in his case, he was an amazing, I hope you know about him. Another period of time, which is equally, I think, important, is 1776. If you've ever read the book 1776, it talks about the strife and how our freedom and our livelihood today hinged on very little that actually went okay at a time where it needed to. But it was not a guarantee. People have to fight every generation to retain our freedoms. And although we'd love to be passive and not have to fight, we have to be prepared. And I think that's a key lesson in the military to consider, because a lot of times people judge us, like in the Vietnam War, about how we went there and somehow my father was a Vietnam veteran, how they wanted to go and they wanted to kill. That's so far from the truth. And so looking deeper into the military, there's some things that I want us to consider. And one is military will. How many in our military go there to say, I want to die? Not a single one. That's not true elsewhere. They believe that in some cultures, they believe that's the highest thing, is to go out and die. That's not true in our military. Our military is intent to preserve life wherever we can, even when people are attacking us, to use the least amount of force against someone who's trying to attack you. And I think it's a huge distinction when you think about why people join the military. We're trying to protect our homeland, and if we have to fight elsewhere, isn't that better than having to fight in our front door? These are some concepts I just, after Renee and I talked, I just thought, leader's role. What is a leader's role? We're going to talk about that for a little bit. But what's the intent? What are we focused on? And I talked a little bit about that with the will, that we're trying to be successful and protect and have protect a quality of life. Strategies is a word that gets thrown around in the military. And the idea with the strategy is it's designed to get what you want. So that if you're not getting what you want, that's not a good strategy. I call that an interception strategy, because either they're going to, if you're playing football, which we know a little bit about the rules, if you play football and you drop the ball, well, that's bad. But if the other team gets the ball and runs it to a touchdown and wins the game, that's a really bad interception strategy. Unfortunately, many people think about what they do and they just look at the motion. So I never mistake motion for action. Action is sustainable. So strategies are very important, not only to define initially, but to follow up on, to see how well are you doing? Is this working? And to work with the other people. And then the final one that I threw up here, because I thought we might want to consider, is sources of power. People think that the military got all this power. Well, you know what? Not so much. It's not technology that wins the day. It's not just boots on the ground that wins the day. It has to be so many things. And when we're talking country to country, we're talking diplomatic sources of power. We're talking information sources of power. We're talking military and economic. And those who don't understand the military want to use the military first, where everybody else who understands the way of the world and the way of life wants to use the military last. That's if everything else fails, that the military has to go in and do something. So very judicious use of our military. What's the number one problem ready to undermine us? Whatever your intentions or efforts. Any guesses? I won't tell you yet. I'm going to save that. I want you to know that, because trust me, I spent my entire career trying to figure out how come we're always being undermined in achieving what we want. It seems so clear. It's like the logic there, but it doesn't happen. So I'm going to talk about 3 tools. I talked about Athena already, but that's the helmet. So I actually have my own helmet to represent what I think you can see it in the little square, right? Can you see it in the little square? I have a helmet here, and I just want you to know that it's very important. I wear it from time to time just to say, okay, I really have to protect my brain because it wants to get upset. And I know that's not very beneficial. The second tool that I want you to see is the shield. So I have a little shield here. And the shield here is to protect us. I believe life is like flaming arrows coming at us. And when those arrows are coming at us, you better have your shield up. It may not be they were aiming for you, but the fact is life is risky. Crossing the road is risky. Doing certain things, activities are risky. But you want to have your shield. So first you can protect yourself, and then you can protect those who are with you. You'll be adept at using it, kind of like Wonder Woman. I love Wonder Woman. And then we have the sword that's in the corner. So I have a sword over here. And some think that the sword is something to be negatively applied because it can harm people. Well, the truth is people may already be harming other people. And you need the sword as a tool to be able to deflect any attacks that come directly toward you, that maybe the shield isn't enough. You may need the sword to deflect it. And then in the really extreme cases where people misbehave badly, you want to use this to pin them down. I'm not saying skewer them. That is something that would be last resort, but you want to pin them down so that you can buy yourself some time in order to work out a better solution. So those, I just want you to consider those when we talk about the next topics as a way to think about the tools that we have in our lives. And an example I can give you is if we were in a violent disagreement about something, I'll wager I could come up with a question that could change the way that we are approaching our situation entirely, and hopefully move toward, the better you get at asking questions, the more you move toward where you want to be. So that's just an example. An effective question can actually operate in all of those ways that I just described. So what's the primary role all leaders take to build amazing teams? This only took me how many years, Renee? I forget. We talked about it. How many years did I figure it out? Oh, I
3
did it.
decades.
Yeah, I did it naturally, but I didn't understand. That's a lot of times when we're successful. Isn't it hard sometimes to explain it to someone? Well, why does that work? Or because it's not the obvious. Sometimes people think that your job is to stand, I'm 5'5", stand like 6'5", be all tough and gruff and give orders. That's what some people think. And that is not what I found out. So this is, I will give you the answer to this one. It's to bring out everyone's best. It's to bring out everyone's best. Isn't that simple but elegant? It's like, if you knew that that's the whole role, whether you're a parent because you're leading your family, if your role is something else in your job, if you only focused on this, and oh, by the way, you're the first person you have to focus on, because if you're not at your best, you can't give other people your best. You can't get the best out of them. But this, I'm gonna let you sift that for just a moment. Bring out everybody's best, just because it's so impactful. And it's something you actually know how to do, right? I'm looking at Anne. I know Anne knows how to do it. It's like, it doesn't work all the time, because if you're not at your best, you're not in the mood because someone may have ticked you off, but you do your best to stay there and not yell at them. All right. So here we go. What's the number one problem that I asked you before? I bet you were waiting for this one, right? Because I tell you, this is the one that took a lifetime to get. And really, without the help of my colleague, Alexi Katko, and some of the other people, I really didn't understand where the problem was. What I saw was the symptom. The symptom that you'll see, for example, is people getting angry, people disagreeing violently, people hurting each other. But this is something I'm sure each of you have had an initiative that you wanted to start, and someone walks up to you and tells you something you don't want to hear. Like we had a ceremony the other day, and someone's like, I forget what they said, you're insulting the dead. It's like, what? We're doing what? No. We're disrespecting the dead, even worse, right? And it's like, no, you have no concept of what happened, what the situation was. But that's because of this number one problem. Are you ready for it? Okay. Poor stress skills. If someone has poor stress skills, they are just waiting to undermine, because all you have to do is propose something a little different than what they expected. If you don't meet their expectations, they will act in the following way. It's called survival mode thinking. I bet in COVID and all the things that have happened in the past year and a half, each of us have felt this way. We either wanted to fight somebody because it just was wrong or something, is what we thought, or we just wanted to run away and not deal with it, or we had to sit in the room with someone we just didn't want to think about or watch, and so we shut down and didn't engage, didn't use any of our talent. Well, this, a military person understands, because when our lives are at risk, and I have been in places that were being bombed, I have had people shooting weapons near me, trying to hit us. I have been in personal attacks when you tried to lead someone and they didn't want to go, or you have an enemy who's trying to kidnap you. These are all important skills, but on a day-to-day basis, absolutely harmful, that leads to poor choices. If it's not life or death, and even then you're still, I'll go back to my helmet, trying to to say with that. So this is some of the things that what we've learned in combat and learned in our training is that this is, again, a last resort, just like engaging the military. You really want to hold back on survival mode thinking, because these three options almost always make a situation worse. Let me say that again. These three options almost always make a situation worse. And when we stop, when I finish, I just have a couple more slides left. When I finish the slides, we can then talk about that. But this piece is huge. So I'm going to have you look at that again, because how many here can raise your hands, because I can still see hands. How many here have seen, can recognize those three? Fight, flight, or shut down. Can you recognize that when you want to do it or when someone else wants to do it? Okay. Resisting it is this slide. Very, very difficult to resist survival mode thinking under extreme stress. And these are the reasons why. I call it instinct stink because survival mode instincts, they're hardwired into us. You know, if you're going to put your hand on a hot griddle, you know, okay, you got to move it. But again, this is an instinct that in most cases, if someone ticks you off and you decide, like people stress, that's a very specific category. Have you ever had someone get you so upset and you just wanted to do one of those three actions? Well, that's your instincts doing it. Being able to show kindness in that area or asking an effective question is a skill. And to make it worse, our culture, our families, and our work norms reinforce that. How many of you have had people tell you, you should be angry? You should quit that job. You shouldn't talk to that person anymore. Just forget them. Even if it's a family member. You know, it's like, that doesn't work very well. And then, depending how old we are, some of us are a little up there in years, so the years of practice, you've made it a habit. So it's a comfortable habit. And habits, as you know, can be hard to break. Some can be easy, and there's tricks to that. There's a whole science to how to break really tough habits. And then I think the fourth one is really underestimated, is those appearances. If you think about a iceberg, you know, what is the portion of an iceberg that we usually see? At least while we still have icebergs, sad to say. But the icebergs, 1/10 is usually above the water, and there's 90% below the water. And oftentimes you'll get tiny bit of information that someone's feeding you with their own values and their own intent of how they want to use it. And you may respond to that or react to that based on what they've told you when they haven't told you the 90%. There's a whole lot more going on. And so you might want to quickly react instead of ask a couple questions, maybe. Sometimes that might buy you enough time to at least get a grasp of what's hidden. But if you just quickly react in a negative way, goes back to very poor choices. And oftentimes I don't have enough time to overcome when I've done that. I think I've taken all the negativity out of my email that I sent at 1:30 in the morning. I probably didn't, but I was choosing, do you send it or do you wait? And I'm thinking, if I don't send it now, it'll never go. That's a choice, but I run the risk of having a tone in there that maybe that might not be helpful. And so to produce helpful solutions, you have to look past the obvious. All right, so even when we have all the facts straight, what we do next might be totally wrong for the outcome you seek. In battle, that is so true. You may have the numbers, you may have the placement, and what you do next may be absolutely wrong for what it is you want to achieve. And in my case, I have two parents still around, 89 and 95. And my dad is someone who's very intellectually there. However, he knows how to what we call push hot buttons of my mother. Do you have family members that do that too? Maybe they know. And I'd say in the US, not elsewhere, because I'm working with another country, the United Arab Emirates, and they don't do this. They often will say yes to the detriment of whatever the situation is. But in our country, in the US, many people, I'd say about 70%, if you say something that's not perfect or not in line with what they're thinking, the word that comes out of their mouth is no. And in my dad and mom's case, my mom will say, hey, we went shopping yesterday and I bought, and my dad in the middle will interrupt her and say, no. So one saying no is hot button all by itself. And then he'll pile on and he'll say, you went the day before. And then my mom will say, you know, I'm always wrong. Your father says I'm always wrong. And you know that that situation is actually, he's right, but he's totally wrong for the situation. Unless, of course, you want to get them upset. And so here, I just want you to understand that when I have those tools, hopefully you say, to be mentally tough, is that you actually think through what it is you're about to do. You never go to survival mode thinking unless it's you're actually life in danger, and even then questionable. But you come up with ways that you can keep your wisdom, and you can protect yourself and your family, and you can also deal with the hardships and challenges that you face. So that's what I wanted to, at least as a backdrop. And now I'd love to go move into a discussion.
Wonderful. That was so beautifully and clearly presented, Deb. Thank you so much. Represents so much life wisdom. And I love that being a lifelong learner is something that you have actually on your website, which is something that Still a Moving Center, and in particular, the gyms is devoted to, is this lifelong learning. And it certainly came through what you presented to us, that you have taken so many years of hard-won experience and processed them in a way that you can make what you've learned accessible to other people.
It's interesting, isn't it, that to take these very, I would say that they're complex, and that you have to take these concepts, but to be able to, I always wanted to be able to do it so a child could understand, which in the short run, you've seen the book, but I have a book out with cartoons because I want to say that we have a lot of people like this bull that are upset. They are upset every single day, and we want to make it so that they work together well with everybody. But we forget it. We wanted to make it hard and complicated, but it's not. It's complex, but it's not complicated. It's very understandable, but you have to keep the goal in mind. So thank you for that, Renee. Renee just got me. You understand with her words how she's talked about this. There are many people, it takes me a long time, that they just don't get how empowering and powerful these concepts are that I just presented.
I think we had a question from Ram Das. Ram Das Lam is a religious studies professor at UH Manoa.
Excellent.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, Deb, I'd like to, first of all, thank you for the things that you said. One of the things that you talked about that I think is really important, I mean, I think a lot of what you said was very important. One of the things that you talked about that I think is important, that is too often not understood by the people within our country today, is that somebody who's been in the military, and I say this as a Marine veteran, somebody who's been in the military, the last thing they want is war, because they know that if they go to war, they may die, their brothers and sisters may die, and innocent people may die. I think the most important politicians that we can have dealing with international issues are veterans. I don't think they're lawyers. Most of our, unfortunately, most of our politicians are lawyers. They don't understand what war is about. Somebody who's been there, somebody who's seen it and done it, somebody who understands it, and somebody who realizes that the last thing we want is war. We want options.
It doesn't really work. It doesn't. It's not sustainable. You destroy a country, you destroy their infrastructure. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, and we've seen it continually, and for some reason our politicians never get the message.
Yes.
So anyway, thank you.
Sadly, thank you for highlighting that. What else did people get out of it? What did it like pull on? Because I know that you've been so supportive. What are some other things, takeaways that you want other people to know? Because echoing it is sometimes the most powerful thing we can do.
Well, I kind of have a question mulling around in my head.
Go ahead.
About wisdom that you started talking about at the beginning. And wisdom is elusive, and sometimes you don't know where it's going to come from. I was thinking of Socrates, who was told by the Delphic Oracle that he was the wisest man in Athens because at least he knew he didn't know. I was wondering, like I found in my work that if I'm open, really open to others, and I use as a saying with my employees, because I'm in the construction field, that reason prevails, that I'm not the possessor of wisdom. Wisdom comes through all of us. And I was wondering what your thought is about trying to say, transform the battlefield by being open to wisdom from others that may seem to be your adversaries, or you might be in a tense situation with. How would you do that?
If I may, thank you for asking this, Cliff. It's such an important point with wisdom. And I think why the still and moving center is so impactful is that when we are living human beings and we are still so unknowing of our potential, really of exploring that and knowing. I met a gentleman, for example, if he had something he needed to look up in a book, he would have a clear intent in his mind. He'd go to the right shelf, he'd pull out the correct book, he'd open to the page, and he'd find exactly what he needed. Now, most people, that blows their mind. But we had wisdom as well with Rangers. They worked, or maybe they were, I can't remember if they were Rangers or Delta. They're obviously very high speed, very specialized group. And they worked with people who are mindful people on our island we called it the Jedi program. And they could actually detect metal in ground from mines and things without any equipment. I mean, the wisdom being open to what we can't maybe understand. And that was kind of my whole early life, is I couldn't explain it, but I knew there was something I needed my attention. And people were constantly swatting me down. Why are you even asking these questions? Why do you even bother with it? And I just knew it was important, but we can't always put our finger on what is it that's important. But I think when you come at life with that mindset that you are open, that you don't know it, and people do it in classrooms and everything. It's the youngest person, the 4-year-old could have the answer to our biggest issues. And we seem to be so constrained, engineers especially, that if it's an engineer problem, we have to have an engineer answer. It's like, no, I would invite all kinds of people to my engineer meetings. And it was my job to tee up the question so that they could contribute. And a piece with wisdom is the only way you can truly access it is if you feel safe to contribute. And people would say, my meetings were exciting. Who has an exciting meeting at work, right? But my meetings were exciting because there were two things my equal opportunity person said, because she said, your meetings are exciting. I said, what? And she said, yeah, your meetings are exciting. I said, you don't let anything go by. And what she meant by that is if a negative energy or negative words were said by somebody, I call them, the range is cockroach attacks, those are the full-on yellers, to termite invasions, those are the nitpicking things that people just knit away. But if you let it go along in an organization, your structure will fall. And if I heard either one of those, I would not yell at them, because you can't use anger if they're upset. You can't use that. You want everyone to feel safe. I'd say, Janet, you just said this, and I have some thoughts about it, but would anyone else like to say anything? And they'd be laughing by that time because I called them on it. And then the other people would go, oh, wow, you said, and they would build it up. And the second thing I did, that was one, is so that the ones who it's like Tourette's, these negative words come out of their mouth like no, so automatically that they will deny that those words have come out of their mouth until someone else talks to them about it. And the second piece of accessing that wisdom to make them feel safe is if you were in my meeting, and let's say it's getting to be close to lunch, and we've gone around on a topic that's very important, but everybody's tired and they want to go, I might ask you an effective question I found is, Cliff, boy, you seem to know a lot about this subject and we haven't heard from you today. Would you mind sharing? I know that the group would really want you to share some things based on our discussion today of what do you think we could do next? Or what is it that you're thinking about in the topic? And chances are you would be willing to say something. And you had already been thinking about it, but if you don't make it feel safe for other people to talk, they won't share. And then what happens is when something goes wrong, because you didn't access the wisdom, when something goes wrong later, and you might say something, well, I could have told you that. And then everybody turns to you and wants to choke you because they'll say, why didn't you speak up? And what they should be doing is going back at themselves and saying, why didn't you make it safe so Cliff could talk? Or quit rushing through an agenda so Cliff could talk and share what he knows, and we know he knows. So I hope that's a long answer to your question, but it's such a beautiful way to tee up why it's difficult to access our full wisdom, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. The idea of just making the space safe for everybody is one of the ways to diffuse a lot of those other things that are, that you don't want as part of that gathering or whatever. No, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. Did that trigger anybody else that we have here? I see Carol's here. Who else do we have? Mary?
I'll go if nobody else
Sure.
is.
Go.
So, and it's great because Renee reminded me of this topic last weekend. So I'm so grateful to be attending today. I actually am a retired RN. I did open heart surgery here in Monterey for almost 10 years. But I am a complex post-traumatic stress disorder patient, as I was in a 15-year profound abusive relationship to a man that is under investigation for multiple homicides here on the Central Coast. So having been married to somebody that was innately incredibly evil, misogynistic, white supremacist, that had a lot of connections within the cartels and the gangs and everything else, and survived it. And instead of, I've been waterboarded, I've been beaten, I've had the most atrocious things that occurred to me. And about 2 years ago, I attempted suicide and was revived. And I came back a very different person, somebody that is hell-bent on righteousness and vigilante justice. If there's not going to be justice served one way that I was going to fight back however I could. And I just won one of the largest settlements in federal history for domestic violence related trauma, for victims advocacy and battered women syndrome. They awarded me 100% lifetime disability this last month. And it set a precedence for other battered women that are trying to establish disability as it relates to the traumas that they endured at the hands of ex-military or gangs or groups that are very hard to prosecute. And I am in my first year of law school. I have been in 2 years of aggressive complex treatment here in California doing equine therapy. I've gotten my ticket came up for my first service dog. And there is life on the other side for people if they have a safe place to explore it. And I'm very grateful at my colleagues for saving my life because they revived me, and that I have an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of a lot of very vulnerable individuals. So to hear that there are other women that strive to bring that same peace to our humanity is very enlightening and insightful. So I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Carol. I think that it's not written on our faces, right? The experiences we've been through. No one understands it. And when you smile, I find that the happiest people are not the ones who had the easiest life. Our happiest people are the ones who make a choice to do it and usually have gone through hell and back and know the difference of how they want to live their life. And so you have replaced what you had with a purpose, which is something that we only have the energy in our lives for the goals that we set. And setting them as high as possible is something I always recommend. And so you have taken upon yourself and already making huge. We all want to applaud you. We all want to applaud you, for sharing and where you are in this process, because you are mentally tough, no matter what what you're still dealing with. You have continued to create a shield to not only protect yourself, but now you're creating it to protect the others so that you can help them or just give them a helping hand to pull them up. And that sometimes step by step, inch by inch, when you use a lifetime, as I have, to try to get to a place where you can offer that to people, you wouldn't be as understanding without those horrid experiences. So in a way, they're a blessing because, and I know I don't say that lightly, because going through divorces, having spouses who you misjudge terribly, because they're chameleons and they know what to say when they're in the pursuit and then they change. I mean, people are people. You're always going to have people stress. You're not going to have necessarily the psychotic criminal kind. But you think of that, you have faced the worst. You literally had to go to survival mode to just get through the next day. That's not, I'm reinforcing that there are times in life we must do that, where we want to quit, look at the suicide rate for the country, all ages. And using that is a survival mode instinct. It's not a good one, we think, because it destroys not only this beautiful, talented life that you're showing. You are showing exactly what I talk. When people want that as a choice, look what we would be missing. You helping, you stepping forward and getting out of the muck. I mean, you literally had to pull yourself out of that muck in order to take the next step. And how empowering that can be in sharing your story, not just the judicial side, which is huge, but keep sharing your story that there is life after these horrible circumstances. It's like a storm. It's like a storm that hits us. Say it's the worst tornado, hurricane, lightning, whatever. And if you have a tree to hold on to, I actually have a picture somewhere, it might even be down there if Alexi can find it, but it's a picture. I have someone holding on to a tree because they may be horizontal, but they're holding on to the tree, and at least they have the tree to hold on to because the storm will pass. If you could just get through the storm and find a way out, right? So I'm so proud of you. We are all so proud of you. That is, and let me just say that your post-traumatic stress is not a life sentence. You choose whether it's a life sentence. The society today is now labeling people, and I'm sad to say that people who have gone through horrific things as well, that they will never get clear of it. My doctor said, you should have post-traumatic stress. You should, with all the things you've experienced in life, you should have it. But I haven't. And I wouldn't have done it if I didn't go through all the garbage in my life early on as an 18-year-old where people treated me horribly and insulted me and put me down and set me back. So, you know, it's horrible way to make life lessons, but you'll never forget them, right? You'll never forget them. And you'll be able to help so many people. I think it's brilliant, your path, and we want to encourage you anyway. You know how to get a hold of me with Renee and stuff. I just want to make sure. Mentally Tough Women is my website. So mentallytoughwomen.com is my website. So Deb at Mentally Tough Women is a way to get a hold of me. But thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that piece of you. Thank you.
Deb, I want to go on a little bit different, very different tack. I really want to understand something. I'm going to give you a backstory.
Okay.
We have an older son, Cliff and I, who from the time that he could hold a crayon was making pictures of people's arms and heads getting chopped off and blood spurting out and, you know, bombs blowing up. I mean, you know, he showed a very early tendency. Every stick turned into a gun or a sword. I think you know the type. And as he came to a point at the end of high school, beginning potentially to go to college, he was getting approached by and actually actively seeking out different ones of the military representatives who were trying to recruit him. And my conversation with him was like this. Sweetheart, I know that there are people whose life path is to be a soldier. I know that. I also know that that you do have a really caring heart, and my fear for you in going into the military would not be that you would lose your life or get injured, but that you might do harm to someone else, and that might impact you in a way that was very difficult for you to survive, to know that you had caused someone else's harm. And I suggested, by the way, that maybe if he felt the need to go to battle, maybe he could battle fires rather than people. And he actually took that suggestion up. And so he is a firefighter.
Yes.
Yet I really do know that there is that calling from some people to follow that warrior's path. It sounds as if that was your calling. And so I'm wondering, like, how does someone go through that and retain their caring heart? And I know that it's possible. I'm just wondering how. It seems like there would have to be so many internal shields that one puts up so that one can do what one has to do as a soldier in battle. and yet how do you still keep your that more sensitive part of your heart alive and open? I know that it's possible, but I don't understand how.
Okay. Let me just tell you what I'm thinking about as you say that.
Mhm.
I was lucky that my parents established in me really a work ethic and putting myself out there, like horseback riding, jumping horses, doing crazy stuff, which the therapy you're doing, equine therapy, I mean, I am at one with a horse. You get me with a horse, I just need to be next to a horse or just look at a picture of a horse, and that is good for my insides. And I had a father who served in the military, and he was persecuted. He was Jewish. I mean, he is Jewish, and he's 95, and at a time where Jewish generals didn't exist, and he made it all the way to general officer, and he had a values to always do the right thing, even if it was unpopular. And so I had that, and mine wasn't a foregone conclusion to be in the military, only that it was a way to pay for it and my schooling, and also because I knew that if I did the hard stuff early, like that would be a tough path, but if I did it early, then I would have more options. I'm a gal who likes choices. I told you I like pies, I like all kinds of things, but I like to have a lot of choices. So I knew that if I did the hard path first, then I could go do other things if that was what I wanted to do. And I found out that as a woman in a men's world, sorry guys, but the men's world was tough because women since 1802 had never been there. We arrived in 1776, 1976. And, a long time after the school had started, and it was a social revolution. And every step of the way, I think I heard my father, just saying, keep doing the right thing, do your best, figure it out. And it was like a horrible backlash of saying everything was telling me you shouldn't be here. And if anyone knows anything about neuroscience, when someone tells you not to do something, what do you want to do? You want to do it. You want to prove them wrong. You want to, I'm going to go out there. So I think that, but I didn't do it just because I wanted to show for it. I actually had my dad's selfless service, I think, built into me to say, I don't know if I can help myself, but I can help other people. And wherever I went, I learned that being in leadership roles, I could create the environment to make it safe, kind of what Cliff and I were talking about. You can make it, I can't always manage up, but I could manage my group. And if they were being talked about, I could be that shield for them and create an environment where their brilliance. And I think that really drove me, is that when you've worked with someone who maybe was not living up to anywhere near their potential, and you create an environment where their brilliance just shines all the time and they're happy and they're well adjusted, that is like an energy that just fed me. It just fed me. Even if my boss was saying, you talk too much, or you do this, or you do that, I could kind of go, nah, 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 nah. And I could look at the people and the results I was seeing and be thrilled. There's no way I could have done the Iraq mission of $2.1 billion construction in the height of the surge and all the other attacks that were going on in my two provinces of Al Anbar province and Baghdad. I could never have done it without the talent that I was able to unleash and bring together. And they rotated 15, 20% a month. It was like everything I'd learned in fast forward. It's like, okay, what's the most important thing I can do? One is when they arrive, I had to meet with them. I had to meet with them when they first arrive to give them that kind of net to say, I know your job's going to be so tough. You tell me how I can best support you, and mean it, mean it. So I think that those who have the diagrams of the killing, and we are facing a future where I had a 3-year-old watching, I think, the Ninja Turtles. I opened the door and the little boy came out and kicked me in the shin. Kids, they cannot discern the fake world and the real world. They they mirror what they see. And that's another instinct, is to mirror. And that's a skill, not to mirror anger, not to mirror destruction. And I had to build on that skill and protect it. But I think that that's how one holds on to your humanity. And as you've seen, unless you can be able to come at things with kindness and love, you will never make the impact that you think you'll be, that you have the potential to make. And I think people knew that I just loved people, no matter what culture. The Iraqis, I love them. We had people from Gurkhas from Nepal. We had the Gurkha guards. I mean, they would keep me safe at night. But when you can treasure every human being, except, like I said, Carol gave us a great example of ones who are so disturbed, that's a whole nother category. Psychotic and whatever. They just need to, remember I told you about the sword? You need to pin them down so they can't hurt anybody else. And I do that a lot. I do that, and I was able to do that. If someone was yelling at another person, I could interrupt them. I may not do it elegantly, but I might say, "Hey, who are you yelling at?" And then they turn toward me and I'd get my shield up. I duck. Because I'd rather they attack me than somebody else. So I hope that helps a little bit. And bless your heart for directing his energies in a way that you got all of the excitement, trust me, in firefighting and the danger and whatever. But here you learn you're there to help other people. Save lives. I see we have Maurice. Maurice, are you ready to ask a question? Oh, we're almost over.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I mixed up the time.
Oh,
we had a time shift in Pacific time, but so what my question would be, if you had to synthesize your basic points, especially like 1 or 2 points, especially from your military training, and I have not been in the military. What are the 2 things or 3 things that really stand out?
Before I answer that, the beauty is they've recorded this, so you can go back. But I think that the first part is that we have a lot of history, but we don't seem to learn much. We have this history and these things are known, and some of us unlock it and go, oh my gosh, this has been going around since 2500 BC. But why is it that people don't understand something? That's one. And then really clearing the misperceptions and myths about military people, that we're actually are looking to serve others, to help others, to take care of our world, because we have a deep sense of service. I hope that someone else can maybe talk about that, but that's certainly what motivates me every day. Is I know that what I've learned, if I'm a very practical person, you can study these things and you can find the reinforcing points of what we talked about today. But I learned it the hard way. I learned it by thousands of experiences of not having it work well, and understanding and constantly asking, how can I do this better? How can we help other people? How can we get along? How can we tap into people's potential? So that tapping into potential, unleashing that potential is so fabulous. And that's what I love to do. If you give me an insanely hard thing to do, then I will jump on it. And sometimes it's to my detriment. Like Veterans Day, I had 4 events from 6:45 in the morning until 8:30 at night, ending with a PBS panel on TV. And other people might have said, I don't even like to talk in front of people. But when you understand how to handle stress and to use it to your advantage, there's really nothing we can't accomplish together. It has to be together, not by myself, but together. And Renee set such a wonderful climate for me to actually say whatever I wanted.
Well, thank you. That's really, really inspiring. And I have to say, I've always thought so well of the military
Thank you.
because of that service. And also jumping in not knowing what's going on half the time, trying to, but not knowing for sure, but trying to do good and provide service for people. So I'll have to watch, as they say, have to watch the tape.
And I think you're welcome. I think the caveat is that just like we don't have what we've done in our lives written on our forehead, you know, you give people the benefit of the doubt as best you can, but there are going to be times that you have to verify, you trust but verify, in order to make sure that they are okay. We have a lot of people who have not done well coming from the wars. You know, we had a guest speaker. He'd been 4 times to Afghanistan and 2 times to Iraq. We have a lot of need, and I think the Still and Moving Center is one of those places that I think that you feed not just the body, but you feed the mind as well, of ways to look at things and to be able to a comprehensive, holistic view of how we can move forward together. Because it's just like music, you know, the rhythm of music. When you're in rhythm and you're creating like a jazz group might do, isn't it beautiful when it comes together and everyone can shine, not at the same time, but shine at different times, like we've had some of the guest questions that have had. I think you're going to love when you take a look. So thank you.
Thank you.
Renee, what else, or anyone else? Carol, did you have something else you wanted to say?
I just wanted to say thank you for your time, and that I really, like I said, very inspired to see another woman, you know, kind of in charge of the greater human population and keeping peace amongst the people. So thank you very much for your service and for your time this evening. And you too, Renee. I really am glad that you reminded me of tonight. So
And
thank you guys.
Carol, we can't wait to see what's next with you. So you better keep us informed of your successes.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, you guys.
And thank you so much, Deb. Really, I think you really went to the heart of why it's called the military service. It truly is the will to be of service to the whole, even if it may result in, you know, the loss of one's own life. And that is such a selfless and high undertaking. And so I think all of us admire you for what you've done for so many years and how you have cultivated in so many others the ability to bring out the best in themselves. And it's very inspiring. So Deb, thank you so much. Yay, round of applause. It was wonderful having you.
Love to you all.
Yes.
Have a great Thanksgiving if I don't see you before. And thank you for the honor of your time and being here today and talking about this important topic. Shared love.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you. Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you.